All right, so we've got folks that are coming in, and while they get ready, I'm just going to say hello and tell you that you are in the next installment of Marketing in Uncertain Times by the Institute for the Study of Business Markets. A few of you are coming in with your videos on, so it would be dandy if you have your videos on to turn them off. Ralph. He doesn't hear me. Oh, there we go. Great. All right, so let's talk about how we use Zoom. For those of you that have become Zoom experts in the last several weeks, you may not need to pay attention to this, but if you have not used Zoom or it's a new tool for you, let me tell you about what we have here. So somewhere on your screen, if you hover over the bottom typically, or maybe at the top, you'll find that display row of these tools that I'm showing you. And we'd appreciate it if you would keep your mic and your video off during the presentations. Ralph Cummins will ask for you to ask questions at some point in the presentation, and then you can use your raised hand and I'll tell you how to do that. At any point during the town hall, if you think of a question, and I know how hard it is to remember it while you're paying attention, please type it into the chat window, and you'll see that you can click on the little bubble thing there and it will open up a chat window, and you can type that chat to everyone, or you can type the chat to Ralph Cummins and he'll see it, or you can type it to Lynn Yanyo or Lori Nicolini. All of us are watching the chat window, and we'll make sure that Ralph gets the question if you want to type it at any time during the meeting. At the end, 20 minutes less or so, we'll open it up to full questions. And so then you can use the raise hand, which you should be able to find there as well. If you raise your hand, we'll see that next to your participant list, and then we'll call on you. And when we call on you, then you can unmute your mic and talk. So just a reminder again, while we're in this mode of presenting and having the panelists answer questions, please keep your video off and your mic off. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide and we'll just introduce the folks, right? So I'm speaking, I'm Lynn Yanyo, and I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for the Study of Business Markets. And we are a consortium group of practitioners, member companies. If you're not a member and you'd like to learn more, please check us out on isbm.com and contact me. If you're, and we also have faculty and educators and researchers that work in institutions worldwide that are a part of this, including 29 esteemed fellows that you can see on our website. And then we have our partners, EMM and Ralph Cummins being one of our partner firms that helps us provide services to our membership. So want to learn more about us, isbm.com, or email me afterward. So I'm going to pass this over to Ralph, who's going to, and we're going to leave that, go ahead, Lori, you can put that up. There's our contact information. We're going to leave that up at various times. So in case you want to follow up with anyone afterward, feel free to. But I'm going to pass this over now to Ralph Cummins. Ralph, I really appreciate you guys putting this together for us. This is going to be a really exciting thing to talk about what we should be doing in communications, and Andy's data looks awesome that's coming in. So I'm going to give it to you and you're off.
All right, Lynn, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our next town hall as well. As Lynn said, let's use that chat button below to pony up questions. I'll be scanning those, and if it's necessary to interrupt one of our presenters to ask one, I will. There will be time at the end of each presentation for questions as well, and we'll have open mic questions at the end of the presentations. So that's really all I have to say. We're going to be moderator light today because we have two great presenters today that are going to share a bit of information with us. So the way the agenda is going to work is Andy Coville, who I'll introduce in a second, is going to go first and share the results from the second wave of the survey that they have done on how people are reacting to, how they're feeling and thinking about the crisis. And this survey is among a group of business and marketing managers and leaders. And then we'll have time for a little bit of Q&A with Andy on her survey results. And then we'll flip over to Tom from Essex Digital, who will share a few thoughts, kind of riffing on what Andy had to say, some trends he's seen. And then at the end, we'll have Q&A for everybody. All right, so that's the rough agenda. Very moderator light, and we'll try to maximize time for our two guests today as well as for questions. And we do have two guest presenters. Very happy and appreciative of both Andy and Tom coming today. I'll introduce Tom first, and I'll introduce Andy second, since she's going to start off the presentation. So Tom is the president and founder of Essex Digital Platform, which is a customized digital marketing solutions that they create for many different clients. Tom's company works across a wide variety of B2B and B2C companies, everybody from Lubrizol to Chrysler to the Cleveland Indians to the Elk & Elk Law Firm. Tom was really a pioneer in digitally driven advertising sales, worked for Clear Channel, CBS Radio, Time Warner, and has a long list of development accomplishments around different things that you might think of as digital industry standards today. So thank you, Tom, for being here today. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Andy Coville is the CEO of Brodeur Partners, a global communications agency headquartered in Boston. The Brodeur Partners works again with a wide range of companies, everybody from Eaton Vance to Sanofi to IBM to Corning to Hankook, both in the B2B and the B2C side. Andy's expertise is in helping companies achieve relevance. You'll hear a little bit about that today, but that's a big part of her practice. And in fact, she's even written a book about it called Relevance, the Power to Change Minds and Behaviors. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Andy to share the survey results with us. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Ralph. We all set?
You're gonna have to go up your display settings and swap your display settings again, Andy.
Okay.
At the top left there.
It doesn't show it there. I'm so sorry. I don't get the display settings prompt on my top. So
Hit escape. Can you see it now?
nope, it doesn't come up. It's funny. Can you see my screen?
You can see your presenter screen, so we see your slide and the next slide.
Okay. Hang on one second. I'll see if I can get it to work. Yeah, it just doesn't.
So we practiced this earlier, just filled the dead air, and it worked beautifully. So it's not that, but Andrea, if you want to, just go ahead and run with it like this.
We'll go with it like this. Thank you. I'm sorry, everybody. First of all, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm sorry about the little technical difficulties. I just couldn't make it work here. I want to tell you, you're the very first group to see this survey. So no one, it's all fresh data. It hasn't been shared with any group yet. And I'm really, looking forward to seeing some of your insights and hearing from you as we kind of go through this. So, sorry, nothing seems to be working here. Hang on. I'll try this. So just like any other crisis, as we're taking a look at this current situation, just like any other crisis, there's things that are very, familiar and similar to prior circumstances. The first one is that, it's obviously really, really important to get everything out really quickly. All of us that are in communications, this is sort of part of the Communications 101 handbook, but you get things out quickly, you centralize communications, you're monitoring information continually. Like every, great communication strategy, the identifying and prioritizing audiences are really important. Today, we're going to talk a lot about employees and customers as the two key ones, but they obviously cascade from there. We know that input and feedback mechanisms to getting feedback to messaging is really critical, and also to provide a continuous update. But what's really different this time around, and we're all seeing this as we're in week 6 or so of this situation, is that unlike any other crisis or environment to communicate a brand experience in, you've got this overarching universal personal physical risk where people are, they're anxious. You don't, I mean, it is a state of existence for a lot of people. There's distractions, yes. There's work for some of us, and there's a lot of work for some of us that don't have work right now. There is a prolonged public uncertainty because there's just such such a vast array of information and sources. And you're going to see in a minute what we found out, where people are telling us when they're not getting consistent information and creating a lot of uncertainty, the sorts of behaviors that makes us, undertake. So I think the situation is very unique because of the uncertainty and the physical risks. And while we're in this situation of social distancing, this social distancing has meant a couple of things. We're communicating through a lens, as we are right now, which is different. It's in a crisis. It's very important to be in an environment where you often have face-to-face contact with people. So that's very, very different. I think, the virtual interface has been very powerful for certain things. In a crisis, at times it isn't as much. And also social distancing also can reinforce a lot of communications with audiences that feel distanced already, whether it's things like diversity and inclusion, for example. So those are things that are very, very different about this crisis. The one thing I'll tell you that is really important, and we're not seeing the world kind of move or companies move in this direction fast enough, is doing nothing is probably the highest risk option there is. And I think a lot of companies are feeling, let's sit back, let's see, I don't have maybe good news to share, or I'm not sure what to say yet, or I don't know what my competitors are going to do. And I think there's this sort of natural hesitancy to sort of stand back. And this is just not one of those times. I think there's one of those times in the world where people actually give you permission to get out there, to share insights, because you have something valuable. You might not have all the best news to share, but at least you're sharing real information. And that is important. So when we were looking what was going on, we've done two studies. The first wave was around March 21st to 22nd. And the second wave was April 7th to 8th. Now, these were all with about the same sample size. Everybody in this group, both groups were employed. Most of them were full-time. Some had their own businesses and some were part-time. Recognizing that everybody that we're talking to right now may not be employed, and there's been a lot of change. So the very first question, we're going to ask you, give you a chance to answer a poll, and then I'm going to present a couple of slides and we'll see how your polling results match that. So Lori, do you want to show the first poll? Let people vote. You can just click on and vote. So the first question is, has your business organization that you're an employee of increased or decreased its communications to the following audiences during the pandemic? Let's just say employees. Just click on whether it's increased or decreased. And then the second question is, has your business increased or decreased communications to your customers during the pandemic crisis? If it's increased, click increased. If it's decreased, the other. Thank you, Lori. All right, so I'm going to share with what our results were, and then we're going to look at yours, what the audience says. So the first question, how do you personally feel? It's really interesting. So if you look, and this is kind of goes against what we would expect, but we as businesses are still under communicating, and even less than over the last 4 to 5 weeks. And so it's a very, very interesting sort of trend. You're seeing the uncertainty in terms of personal attitudes is still the highest. Yeah, the highest yet. Kind of fun that that we're seeing more hopeful people. The hopeful metric has grown, which is great. But the afraid, the afraid and uncertainty obviously is still the highest scores overall. Now let's take a look at what customers are doing. So we're seeing that uncertainty still very, very high. along with fear, but hope is starting, it's had a 7% jump, and the confusion is going down a little bit. But still, people feel that that customers we're still not communicating as much as we could. Want to take a quick look and see what our panelists and see what our survey respondents said, Lori? What is? Wow. So this is completely, this is at odds a little bit, but it's interesting. You all are saying that 92% of you surveyed say that you've increased communications, and it's also increased to customers. Really interesting.
Might have a biased group on the phone.
Yeah, we might. Thank you. So, you know, taking a look at sort of that, you know, and this obviously isn't this group. What happens when people are in this sort of this state of uncertainty is what the brain tries to do is, if you don't have information, you have a gap, your brain fills it in with something that makes sense, something your brain perceives as being reliable. There's kind of three options. What happens? The first is, and I'm not making light of this situation, where people really get panicky and they start to sort of shut down inside. I think there's the whole concern around one's physical health, but I think what we're seeing, the new wave of economic pressure on individuals is also, you know, creating this sense of shutting down. Then on the flip side, as we're seeing some of the relaxing of restrictions in areas like Georgia and others, is a sort of behavior we saw early on with some of the high school, you know, college students over spring break. We're starting to see people kind of bounce back and very quickly resume risky behavior that is, you know, that isn't the answer either. And the third thing, which is where we really want people to be, is to engage, but engage with context, with facts, with science. And we also, when we're talking about our individual brands and the companies we represent, we want engagement, action, and loyalty. Even if they can't walk into a store, or perhaps they can't buy something from you as a B2B supplier at the moment, you still have to, we really want to keep people, all those people that are your key audiences, really engaged with your brand and your mission during this time. That's the desired option. So unfortunately, you know, businesses just aren't communicating as much and as effectively as they could. And, you know, you guys just demonstrated, you know, how, you know, I think as communicators and the people that are interested in marketing, how important it is to you. But what we're seeing is that employees businesses are starting to communicate to their employees less than they're actually communicating to their customers. And you'll see this data in the next slide. But very, very interesting. And then you look at other tangential audiences like media, business or organizing partners, local communities, investors and funders, government and civic leaders. You're starting to see an overall kind of decrease in communications in this survey group. Then you take a look at the effectiveness of the communications, and we're seeing half of the businesses are saying that they do a good job at helping families, at-risk employees, and providing emotional support. But it starts to shift when we're asking people, how are you supporting me as an employee going through this financial crisis? So as companies are articulating their mission and their purpose, you know, they might have gone through a variety of situations. They could have gone through layoffs, they could have gone through furloughs, they could have been retaining their employee base, but the employee is starting to show that they don't feel as effectively communicated to as they did when we first fielded this survey. And it's interesting. It's you know, it's a much greater percentage than before. The other thing that I'm very surprised about, you know, I guess it's because being in the communications business, is that the communications response has really followed, and it hasn't kept pace with the what I would call the operational response of the organization. So, you know, we've been very, very good to, you know, get out there and, you know, align our businesses, you know, getting people to work from home, you know, setting up systems, getting healthcare plans for people. But the integration of virtual and online communications platforms are lagging. And I think, it was really interesting to see Apple's announcement this week. You could see how, like how a great streaming technology was very, very effective. It did not impact their, they had excellent, I think, media attendance. So a lot of these platforms that are very proven and very effective just aren't being deployed enough. Again, I think it kind of pays to my earlier point about people are a little hesitant about communicating right now and kind of being out there and being exposed in some way. So if you ask people if you think about your business or organizations, how much do you think agree or disagree with the following? Again, employees are starting to feel like they may be left out behind in times of crisis. They feel their organizations are doing a good job taking care of the organization, thinking about what they need to do to kind of plan ahead for whatever the economy brings. But I think we're starting to see this change where employees are getting tired. Some people love working from home, some people don't. And some people are having a hard time kind of dealing with that and also dealing with the uncertainty. And so I think it's really important when we're thinking about messaging to employees that we're keeping the content fresh and authentic, because there's sort of a bit of a weariness. Again, this is another point about how the employees are very, very much more, impacted and worried about what's going to be going on with the economy. I think they feel that employers have done a great job with, at-risk employees, certainly with some of the mental health benefits, but they're saying businesses aren't doing all they could be to help them on the financial side. So I think this is, so the key takeaways. What we found in the last 3 weeks is even though there's a considerable amount of uncertainty, the feeling of hope and determination is on the rise. It's the level of communications has, however, remained stagnant. Organizations are under communicating, especially among customers and employees. We're underusing channels and virtual technology, which may be impacting the effectiveness of communications, especially as it's cascading between our employees and their customers, or your employees and customers. And even though we're recognizing our organization's agility in this time of crisis, employees are still feeling very under-communicated to in terms of, the financial aspects of stress. So Ralph mentioned earlier, our whole company is based around this notion of relevance, which is linking communications to behavioral change. And I think there's just been some terrific examples of companies that have sort of played to their strengths, or the quadrant of relevance that, where they really kind of excel. And I love the example on the thinking quadrant. I don't know if you all saw that Dr. David Price, he's from Weill Cornell Medical Center, and the very early part of the pandemic, he put out this amazing video, actually to other doctors and their families, about explaining what COVID meant, how he was protecting himself, how other physicians and caregivers could protect themselves. It was very data rich, science driven, but he broke it down into it was so digestible. It was all about data, which is sometimes a little tougher to engage more people, with just a pure data play. He did an amazing job of this. I really highly, highly recommend it. I think we've seen great examples right now of companies who have used a values play to reinforce and to stay connected with their customers. I also think we've seen great examples where values plays have been used, or it's not an appropriate circumstance, such as, maybe linking a beauty brand with first responders, for example, kind of trying to, create this, sort of draw on their heroism and link it to the beauty brand. I think it would have been much more effective to kind of be part of the community message, to show how they are one of many brands really supporting people on the front lines. I love the example of Steakums. I know it's not a perfect B2B company, but if all of you have seen the Twitter, chat around what Steakums has done, they've just done, here's basically frozen meat. If you are over 40, you may not, under 40, you may not know what Steakums are. It's been a long time since I had a Steakum, but what they have done is they've created this incredible social media thread, really countering misinformation, partisan divides, and just communicating science. So this is a brand that has taken a community of people that are following them and have really broadened their ecosystem by just being authentic and connecting to the experience that we're all going through right now. And on the sensory side, I would say, I think even if you don't have a message right now, say you're an aerospace company or you're a travel company, humans still want to dream, and you can create these experiences that get people to kind of step out of their kind of current situation and really connect to the brand in a fresh way. For example, we just had an astronaut who came and talked about his first 3 shuttle flights and his stint on the International Space Station. And he talked about what those 8 minutes were like from, you know, just basically getting prepped in his seat, getting strapped in, feeling the, you know, the thrusters, feeling the bolts break off, and then starting to orbit Earth every 25 minutes. I mean, and that was the whole thing about this overview effect. It's fascinating. And so if you make a jet engine, maybe there's not a lot of people buying them right now, but you can still create experiences that create wonder and engagement with people, which is really important right now. And then finally, what can you do? Surveying, back to my earlier point, my very first point, get out there, talk about what is going on. You know your customers, you have very unique insights. Surveying and sharing some of those things isn't necessarily giving away competitive data. People are very hungry for reality, the good and the bad. Great social listening tools out there like, you know, Meltwater and Sysmos. They not only are great to sort of track in terms of your own brands, but they're organized now in channels. You can basically track any industry or subject. It's fascinating right now. You can almost create these little dashboards for yourself every day. Purpose, I mentioned earlier, how, you know, articulating why you're in business now and how and what you're doing to kind of serve our world. I think it's a very, very important exercise to go through. It all kind of adds up to the 4th bullet, which is thought leadership. Just there's so many opportunities, no matter what kind of industry you're in, to offer a perspective and to lead. Virtual experiences, I tried to make the case for this a little bit with the Apple example, but we are lagging, and it's crazy. Like we've made such a transition to digital technology as a society, but we're kind of lacking in virtual experiences right now. We're doing a good job, like doing Zoom calls and you know, meetings, but these truly moving to virtual experiences, that's a great opportunity. Look at diversity and inclusion. I think there's going to be, if you look at small businesses in the United States and you see how the proportion of our economy that is truly small business, look at an audience or owners like women, and you look at the lending rates to women, for example. You know, and we're seeing how important and where the gaps are in diversity and inclusion right now. Any company, financial services company, that gets out in front of this right now and I really believe has an enormous advantage about 2 months from now, when we're going to be seeing these issues coming front and center in our economy. So governance issues have to take all of these new things, this new data around diversity and inclusion into account. Don't forget podcasts. They're some of the most effective tools for communication right now. I hope to God that we're not in this situation in the fall, you know, despite some of the news we're hearing. But documenting and capturing every process and procedure in communications right now, you'll have it available, you know, for anything, any crisis you go through again in the future. And I personally feel there's never been a better time to innovate. There's more cool ideas in our, you know, in our company that are coming out every day. And I don't know why that is, if we have more time to think, but I think we're working harder, and we're working harder at trying to innovate and find solutions. So that's my presentation. And again, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Couple of time for a few questions here, and then we'll flip over to Tom. One question I wanted to ask you, Andy, is it's understandable that companies, you know, might struggle to know how to communicate in a time like this, both to their employees as well as their customers. But do you have any insights on what it is they're not communicating enough? In other words, there's a sense they need to communicate more. what is it that they're missing, or what, do you have any ideas around things they should be talking about but they're not talking about?
Sometimes it's just saying what you don't know, but customers are interested in, like, what are your scenarios about getting back to work, for example? Even if you don't know when they are, kind of just walking employees through the different scenarios that you're thinking about, being really transparent about things like financials, being really transparent about what customer relationships, what the impact, the upside, the downside of sales have been. I think people want milestones to kind of orient towards. You're not promising people this is what it's going to be like 4 weeks from now, but trying to give people scenarios about what you're going to be talking about, what you're working on now to deliver against a milestone a few weeks from now, I think is very, very helpful. Companies tend to hold that back and not share until they're absolutely 100% certain.
Okay, thank you. A question from the audience here. This could be a tricky one, but a lot of the people here work for very large corporations where getting any message out is a matter of running the gauntlet of a very sometimes difficult and labyrinthine approval process. Yeah. Any thoughts about best practices that corporations can do to streamline that process so that they can do a better job of communicating in real time and getting messages out?
Well, sometimes what we've seen, like with some of our clients where that's the issue, is sometimes there's less restrictions on individuals' social channels, for example, than versus the company social channels. So if you have a point of view on COVID that you can offer through your personal channels, or something that would be very inspiring, that's a little bit different than offering it through the company's social channels, for example. So we've found those are ways to sort of navigate it. Also, you're working with third parties that can say the quote that perhaps you can't say. Getting some of that third party information into your presentations is another important thing to do.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. I'd like to switch gears now a little bit, and I'd like to kick over to our friend Tom here. Wait a second. Hold on. One more question. There's several coming in, but there's one here that I think is a really good one for you, Andy, before we leave this topic. Any thoughts on how, now we're going to speak to your relevance expertise. Any thoughts on how brand differentiation will change in the new normal? Is there a silver lining in here somewhere that allows us to communicate in new and different ways around our brands going forward?
I think that, I think if you look back to that relevance quadrant, when you think about thinking, I think we always sort of took data for granted. I really think that there's a much higher respect for science and data now in a new way. I think there will be more engagement with science, especially as it related to sort of matters of healthcare, or for healthcare brands, for example. I think values. I mean, I know this isn't a direct. When I think back, I know we're talking, this is more of a consumer brand, but I was so impressed by the Marriott CEO, how he got out front, and did that video, and he talked to his employees about what they were going to be going through and the very, very tough decisions. And he had just come out of a battle with pancreatic cancer and treatment. But the way he handled that situation, he was so authentic. He just was able to communicate who his personal values were, alongside sort of the goals of Marriott. I don't think I'll forget that. When we're able to start traveling again, I will always remember that when I'm checking into a Marriott hotel. So I think people are going to remember when they're out moving around and the world gets a little bit easier again. I think how you as a brand have created relevance now in this moment in time, that is how you will be judged or engaged with or remembered a few weeks out. And that's why I think it is just so important to communicate and to do it authentically.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we're going to come back to general questions in a minute, but I do want to give Tom a chance to jump in here, because Tom is going to show us a little bit of the other side of the coin. Andy's talked a lot about how people are thinking, feeling. Tom's going to share a few facts and figures about how this is playing out online, and some other ideas that you should be thinking about. So take it away, Tom.
All right. Is everybody able to see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, outstanding. First of all, thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join us today. There's been, I think, a very important exchange of information here. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about our digital presence. You know, these are the touch points that our prospects, our clients, our customers, these are the touch points where they engage with us, where they start to absorb and either agree with our message or resist our message. And so a little bit of history. I think everybody here is aware that about 8 years ago, we started to see the bottom fall out of newspapers. We started to see the bottom fall out of cable television with cord cutting. And, you know, that's been a continual trend. But in the last 6 weeks, we've seen something pretty amazing happen, especially with online engagement. So some recent surveys have shown that online traffic is up literally over 20%. And to put that into perspective for you folks, you know, on any given day, the internet will experience over 6 billion active sessions per day. Now, that could be you engaging in 10, 15, 20 of those sessions, but there's over 6 billion. We're presently at this point now over 7.5 billion sessions per day. We're also spending 30% more time while we're online. Now, most of that's going to social. We're seeing across the social platforms, engagements up over 50%, with Facebook seeing engagement as high as 70% in certain marketplaces. More content is being consumed online right now than all other media combined. E-commerce is even becoming the norm. We're seeing it for even basic commodities, things like groceries, toilet paper, pet food. You know, so we're seeing a huge paradigm shift. And I know a number of you are feeling as though demand for products or services or raw materials, et cetera, is down. And that's in the interim. But the reality is survey data showed us that, nope, it's halted, it's pent up. And once we restore some consumer confidence, demand will unleash. And this is going to require an instant influx in supply. So for those of us who are maybe raw material producers, component producers, suppliers to manufacturers, or even suppliers to retailers, it's important for us to understand that this is really an incredible opportunity to prepare. And what I mean by prepare is get ready for that. Be ready to become a better partner to those people that you're selling to. And so let's kind of review how marketers can advance their message during this time. Really, as Andrea talked about, it's content. She gave 10 rock solid examples of some do's and don'ts and the what's and the where's, and that's really incredible. But what I would add to that is that the content should be useful. It should be engaging. It should also be relevant to the target audience. And what I would tell you is a lot of survey data that we're getting back right now is that people are very opposed to being sold to. So what we're recommending to a lot of our clients is this is a great time to brand yourself, a great time to position yourself as a partner in this crisis. So brand and soft sell. If there's things that you need to do or can do that you feel you can advance your sales or your prospecting opportunities, feel free to use incentives where applicable, but again, in a soft sell brand-centric type of environment. Do not be overly aggressive. Focus on optimism. Find ways, again, to communicate how you can solve your prospect's problems. So you want to present solutions. And to kind of bring that home to an example, if you think for a moment as being a raw material or component supplier, and you know that most of your customers have either slowed or stopped production entirely, again, we know that demand is being pent up. We know that there's going to be a need for these people to be able to ramp up productions, get product to marketplace very quickly, and probably address backlogs in the midterm. So this really helps you think about how to present opportunities where they're supported by measurable benefits, how you can use your messaging to develop new prospect pools. People are out there, you know, idle and maybe thinking about, gee, should we source some new suppliers? Should we look for some new raw material? Is this a good time to really evaluate our costs and determine if we've been doing the right thing? So as you think about shaping content, think about the challenges that your prospects and your clients are facing, and think anew. How do I develop those value propositions and communicate them? And lastly, I think, you know, in terms of advancing your message right now, the most important thing is to be empathetic. And it's funny, I think there must be some 1960s marketing rule book that's been circulating lately, because we know 4 weeks ago, it seems like every television commercial started with, now more than ever, during these times of crisis. And then we kind of graduated a little bit to, now more than ever, during these times of uncertainty. And I can guarantee you, if you go to chapter 3 of that playbook, it'll be, now more than ever during these times of difficulty or during these challenging times. What I would tell you is, don't do that. Don't sound like everybody else, and don't sound, it almost sounds condescending. So be empathetic. Understand that, you know, a lot of your prospects and customers are experiencing the same exact challenges you are. They feel like the treadmill is stopped. They're stuck in the mud. They're uncertain what's going to be happening next. And you need to let them know, as a prospective partner or as a partner for your existing client base, you understand that. So take the opportunity to empathize with them and better understand, how can we support you as we move forward? Because there's no doubt we will be moving forward, and I'm hopeful it will be sooner than later. So lastly, let's kind of think about how marketers can position for the future. You know, I know a vast number of folks who are on this call are in the B2B business space, and I'll do my best to kind of speak to that for a moment. But, you know, in that space, we've become a little complacent. We've relied on our trade shows, which have been typically the avenue where we've opened up our network, we've developed new prospect pipelines, and we've hopefully closed those for business. We also know a lot of folks have really used their website as being nothing more than either a sales brochure or a technical document or technical specifications. We know that the bulk of marketing has been in trade journals, trade magazines, things of that nature. This slowdown really gives us an excellent opportunity to take a step back and say, are we really aligning our communications with the way that people want to consume information? And I think if we were to answer that question honestly, we would posit that no, we're probably not. So as a result of that, use this time to really audit and tune up, optimize your websites and any other digital presence you have, whether it's a LinkedIn page, a Twitter account, you name it. Really look through those things and try to understand, what are the things that have worked in the past? What content have our prospects engaged in the most that has created sales opportunities for us? And then figure out ways to expand and expound upon those types of things. Get involved in some very advanced data analysis. One of the things that I found most manufacturers don't do, and this is a little bit shocking, is something that we call attribution modeling. And, you know, to most people's credit, this is not, you know, at the forefront of the industry. It's unfortunately a best kept secret, and it shouldn't be. But 99.9% of companies out there have an active and somewhat up-to-date CRM. And companies like my own are able to take that first-party data and run it through advanced data management platforms, and not just stop and build a persona in terms of what your customer looks like, but even help you break that down into segments. So here's what your different customer segments look like. Here's how they are motivated. Here's what they're interested in. Here's the types of things they're engaging in. And this becomes a very instructive, forward-looking roadmap to help you understand, where do I have holes in content that I need to fill? What systems might we be presently lacking that allow us to more effectively connect with our customers and our prospects? Then, of course, there's things like conversion mapping. And that's a real fancy way of just saying, hey, how is it that we communicate with prospects that eventually lead to them becoming customers? In other words, what was that journey that they took with us? What stopping points in terms of our digital depots, like our website, our LinkedIn page, partner pages, etc., did they engage with on their journey into finally deciding to doing business with us? And what's interesting is when you do attribution modeling and you do it in conjunction with conversion mapping, the thing that you'll invariably discover is that different audience segments engage with your brands in very different ways because they're inspired by very different value propositions, which lead to them becoming customers. And that's where content scoring comes in. You know, you take a look at your Google Analytics and you say, what are the pages that when people get to it, they just aren't interested and they bounce from the page very quickly? And then be honest with yourself and evaluate it. Is it good content? Is it engaging content? Is it helpful content? If the answer is no, contemplate changing it or getting rid of it entirely. And then start to think about what can we put in its place that will be more effective. Reacquaint yourself with your prospects right now. This is a great time to get on the phone, engage with SurveyMonkey, have your salespeople, your customer service people calling and doing surveys. Ask them, what has changed? What can we do to make doing business with us easier and more effective? And then what should you change in order to accommodate all of those things? These are great questions to ask. And, you know, whether they're good times or they're trying times like right now, we don't do enough of this. And to be quite candid, everything that's on this slide are things that we should be doing at a minimum twice a year, but I would posit probably even quarterly as a marketing and sales department. And then
Tom,
lastly,
let me jump
yes,
in
sir,
there.
Ralph.
Yeah, let me ask a question because we're getting a lot of questions here and I want to make sure we get to them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, the same question from several people asked in different ways. And I'll ask it of you first, and I'd like to see Andy's response. A lot of and it kind of has to do with content and messaging. A lot of the messages we see out there sort of right now coming sort of two flavors. There's the we're doing our part message, as in we've converted a factory, we've done this, we've done that, we're giving back. That message is important. And then there's the we're here for you message, right? We're here, we're ready, we're waiting, we can support you. And that it's understandable people go there. But the question that I think everybody wants to know is what's beyond that? Like what's the next level of messaging? Because honestly, we're all doing our part. We're all here for each other. We get that, right? So now what? So what is?
So yeah, that's an interesting point. And as you can imagine, I've spent the last 5 or 6 weeks on daily phone calls with clients addressing those types of things. First off, I'll defer to the former statement because it's really kind of a PR statement, and I'm going to let Andy speak to that one. The second one is we're in this together. Really comes down to the reacquainting yourself with your prospects. What's changed in your business? What can we do better that's more helpful to you? And then I think when you look beyond that, is start to communicate the message that as business evolves, we want to be positioned to make the new paradigm easier, more efficient, more effective. So you start to have to really think about your value propositions that you've been presenting people. Is it stale? Does it need updating? When we think about how business is shifting, how we see e-commerce really coming more into play in areas that we never expected, even in simple supply chain, we have folks that are, rather than calling their sales rep and faxing over the P order for next month or the PO over for next month's supply orders, they're just simply activating a portal, signing in, typing in the order, submitting it, and that's done. So I think the what's next is really helping your customers help you evolve. And I would encourage a lot of content that focuses on that. So Andy, I'll defer to you on the former.
No, I really am in agreement with you. I'm very much in alignment. I think that, I think these have been very nice statements to get out and to show why we care and, how we're here for you. It goes back to one of the earlier points I made, though, showing the data from your customers, show your insights, so show how you understand what your customers are going through and what they're headed. And I love your example of the supply chain, because if you can show the innovation that is really happening right now in many companies, B2B companies that are involved in, say, supply chain, how they've innovated that and have directed and have actually creating and helping provide solutions, for example, to healthcare right now. I mean, there's some amazing examples about the innovation and the collaboration that has come together during this time frame. It kind of points you directionally to where we may be headed in the next 12 months or so. So I would concentrate much more about in thinking about messaging around innovation and collaboration and looking forward, rather than just, we're here for you, which is still important, but.
Excellent. Let me ask you another question, Andy, and then I'll kick it over to Tom. We talked a lot about communicating. Can you over communicate? And how do you know if you're over communicating?
Oh, I think you can. And I think there's only one thing worse than over communicating, and that's being inauthentic. And if you're out there just saying stuff for the sake of saying stuff, just to have a message out there because you think just creating noise is actually the way to stay relevant right now, it isn't. It's actually, and it's like, say something meaningful. Say you have a good point of view. You don't need to say, I think, Tom, you made a really good point. You don't need to sound like everybody else. Just be authentic. Be authentic to your company's missions, why you're here, why you have a point of view. Everybody knows a lot about one thing, and just double down on that, and have a natural cadence to that content. Don't pound people over the head with it.
Excellent. Another question for the panelists from the audience. I'm not even sure I completely understand it from an old friend. Is creating a platform that enables UGC sharing an opportunity. UGC. I think I might need some clarification on that from my friend Earl.
It's user-generated content, Ralph.
Thank you, UGC. There you go. Create a platform that enables user-generated content sharing an opportunity. Is that a good thing?
So I would submit that yes. I mean, any time that you can create a collaborative think tank type of environment, that's healthy. Customers, clients, even prospects, they want to be heard. They want to have a mechanism where they can voice concerns, wishes, hopes, ideas for innovation. But I would also, there's a caveat, natural caveat built into this. That needs to be moderated. I think too often, and when I say moderated, let's separate moderation from censorship, right? Moderation means that we're going to allow a certain level of either challenge or negativity to come through, and then we're going to address that in a very expedient but positive way that shows that we're looking to further that partnership. The worst thing that you can do is censor people. So if somebody complains, you either delete it and don't address it. People see that. And believe me, no matter how well moderated and how well gatewayed your platform is for user-generated content and collaboration, there are millions of others that are outside of your purview. So if you don't manage it properly in your space, that conversation's going to move outside of your control, and that conversation's going to happen away from you, where you don't have knowledge or ability to respond to it. So yes, in the user-generated content environment, make sure it's moderated, but most importantly, make sure that you're responding expediently. Don't let things hang out there too long.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Tom. One thing I will share from EMM from talking to our clients is anything that creates engagement and connectivity between people who are working at home and feeling somewhat isolated is a good thing. And that is, if you have the audacity and the ability to connect your clients through your brand in some kind of conversation engagement, I think that would be fantastic. Andy, did you have a comment about that you wanted to share?
I guess what it made me think of, the question made me think of, is what a lot of higher ed institutions are going through right now with as their students, they've got newly enrolled or incoming students, and how do you create use that environment to kind of connect incoming students with already enrolled students and give them a sense of the university that they are joining. So some of those forums and platforms could be very powerfully utilized by higher ed. But again, I agree with the whole monitoring side to it. You can't, Tom, you can't, you have to have someone kind of guiding if it goes off the rails.
Right.
So I think we have time for one last question. If anybody has it, raise your hand or put it in the chat if you have a question. Anybody, any last questions? All right. I think we're at the end of our time. I'd like to thank Tom and Andy for their time today and for sharing. I'd like to thank everybody else for showing up and for your good questions. And I'm going to turn it back to Lynn.
Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. And I think there's so much information. I recommend that people remember that they can go to ISBM.com and go to the library, we'll see down before. And in about 24 hours, this recording will be there. You're also going to receive, if you signed up for this town hall, you'll get a slide deck from us, as well as a link to the webinar so you can share it with others and go back and look at all those great examples that we were shown that we could work on. I want to tell you about some things that are coming up too, and hopefully get them on your calendar. So next week, April 28th, we have another town hall, and we're going to be talking about virtual VOC with Dan Adams. And then on May 6th, we've landed a great person, Robert Fry. You might remember him from DuPont. He is an economic whiz, and he's going to be talking to us about the current economic situations and what he sees as forecast, as he does monthly forecasting for companies today. And then May 12th, we have Measuring Progress with Bob Thomas and Laura Patterson. That should be a great town hall. And then a webinar on market research on May 28th. You can find all of those on ISBM.com in the event section. Feel free to sign up. And then Lori, if you could put back the contact information for everybody. If you come up with a question that you didn't get answered and you thought of it later, feel free to reach out to any of the folks here. And you can find any of the folks from ISBM, Rand, Becky, and Lynn, on our website at isbm.com, and you can just connect to us through the contact us. So again, thanks a lot, everyone. I appreciate all of your time, and let's just wave goodbye. Hey, awesome that you did it. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.